Shalom, shalom, shalom. I want to give all glory, honor, and praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakah HaKwadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles and bishops of Great Millstone. Peace, blessing, and salutations to the hopeful elect scattered abroad, teaching His word in truth and sincerity. I'm back with another lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai. And this lesson is going to be on diligence, showing diligence in His truth, right? Reading, studying. Those things are needed for you to sustain yourself in His truth, right? And that shows that you really believe, right? The effort that you put into this truth, right? If you don't put any effort, how do you expect to grow? Right? So it's going to be a milk lesson, of course, but just something short and to the point, right? So this is Hebrews 6, and I'm going to start at 10. For God is not unrighteous to forget your work and labor of love, which ye have showed toward His name, and that ye have ministered to the saints and do minister. Right? So by us doing these lessons, by us studying, reading, going into the doctrine of Yahweh Shem Shai, and we're ministering to the saints. Right? So the Lord is not going to forget our labor of love when it comes to us preaching and teaching this word of Yahweh Shem Shai. It says, and we desire that every one of you do show the same diligence to the full assurance of hope and to the end, right? So you want to show that same diligence. Everybody in the truth is going to have that fire about them when it comes to this truth, right? Understanding that they've been called into this ministry to work, to sacrifice, so that you can show yourself worthy to Yahweh Shem Shai, so that He can see you as a diligent worker, and that you fought the good fight of faith, right? It says, and we desire that every one of you do show the same diligence to the full assurance of hope and to the end, that ye be not slothful, but followers of them who through faith and patience inherit the promise, right? So you can't be slothful in this thing, man. You come into the truth, you're not reading, you're not studying, you're not going over these breakdowns, you're not applying the things that you learned when you do learn them in your daily life. If you're not doing those things, hey, the Lord He's not going to remember you, right? Because it's all about you doing the things that you're learning, right? If you learn how to do things better, you're supposed to do better. In the world, they say if you knew better, you'll do better, right? So everything is supposed to be shown in your actions. Let me read that one more time. It says, and we desire that every one of you do show the same diligence to the full assurance of hope unto the end, that ye be not slothful, but followers of them through faith and patience inherit the promise. Right, so those men who inherit the promise, and they're not going to be slothful, right? They're going to understand what they're involved in, and they're gonna get to it, right? And nobody is exempt, And me first and foremost, I have to make sure I'm diligent, That's why you watch lessons, That's why you watch the brotherhood, man, because they build you up, man. Right? They exhort you, to do better, or to study more, or to be on point more. Right? That's why you have a brotherhood. Right? But this is very important in this truth, that we do what we need to do, man. And no excuses. We have to do what we need to do. If we need to study, we need to study. If we got to read, we need to read. If you got to look at videos, you got to look at videos, and you should want to do these things. It shouldn't be grievous to watch videos. You should want to learn. You should want to grow in this truth, right? Because we're almost out of here, right? We're almost out of here. Brothers that are in the truth right now are on course to getting immortality. We're on course to actually receiving salvation, right? We're not in the world. The Lord called us from that, We're not in those lots of those men who were once in the truth but no longer in the truth. We're not in those lots, man. We're in the lots of those men who will receive salvation. Now we just got to finish our course. We just got to go until the very end, no matter what happens, right? We have to actually do what we need to do, right? Let's go to that word diligence. The word diligence is spodazo. Spudazo.
Strong's G, 4704, spudazo.
It says
Spudazo.
to hasten, to make haste, to exert oneself, to endeavor, give diligence, right? To exert oneself, right? You got to exert yourself in His truth, man. Exert yourself. Put effort into it. We know this truth is about labor, right? So you have to labor in this truth. And labor doesn't always feel good. It doesn't feel good sometimes. Sometimes, when you are studying and you find out what this means, or the precept means, or what this word means, and it goes with your understanding, or it makes your understanding more clear. Hey, it's beautiful, but up until that point, it might have been grievous. Like, damn, I gotta try to figure out what this means and that means, and I gotta go study this and this and that. But then when you see the fruits manifest itself, it's all worth it at the end, right? So to exert oneself, right, it's pretty much laboring in this truth, right? You're laboring. Let's go to First Corinthians, I believe. First Corinthians. I'm trying to figure out where exactly this scripture's at. Bear with me, y'all. It's First Corinthians. I believe it's 15. 15 and 58. So this is First Corinthians 15 and 58. It says, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as ye know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord." Right? Right? The scriptures just said that the Lord is not going to forget our labor of love. Right? So we have to be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. Right? We have to always have our heads in this book. Right? In Joshua, the first chapter, I believe the 8th verse talks about how we have to continually meditate in these scriptures. Our whole lives are supposed to be meditating on this word, filtering everything that we're going through the word. Right? We're going through this. Okay, what does that scripture say? We're about to go do this. Okay, what's the scripture say about, operating in this situation? Right? All these things have to be coming to play, as a man of the Lord, right? Because we have a blueprint, we have a standard that we have to keep. So the Bible gives us that standard. So we go to the Bible, to fulfill that standard, right? Right. So you're going to get out what you put in this truth. If you don't put any effort into this truth, how do you expect to get anything out of it? Right. If you're not laboring, if you're not going into these scriptures, if you're not doing what you need to do, how do you expect to labor? Or how do you expect to like it? How do you expect to benefit? How do you expect to have fruit in this scripture? In the word, Slakia. Right? Let's see something real quick. Let me go to the scripture, and I believe it's Sirach. This is Sirach 6 and 18. "My son, gather instruction from thy youth up, so shalt thou find wisdom to thine old age. Come unto her as one that ploweth and soweth, and wait for her good fruits." Right? So when this truth, it's like one who is plowing and sowing. Right? You're gaining wisdom and knowledge. Right? This book is full of wisdom and knowledge in the sight of the nations. Right? So we're plowing and we're digging for this wisdom and knowledge. It says, "And wait for her good fruits, for thou shalt not toil much in laboring about her, but thou shalt eat of her fruits right soon." Right? So eventually we're going to see the fruits. Right? It might not come exactly when you want it to come. It might not come immediately, but eventually you'll see that those fruits are, the fruits or the labor that you've done in this truth is going to bear forth those fruits. Right? So that's why you have to be diligent in this truth. That's why you have to actually put effort in this truth. Right? Right? And every brother, around you, every brother around you is trying to put in that work. Right? That's the motivation. Seeing the brotherhood working, going over what they need to go over to be more wise. We got to go into the highways and byways. And with that task, you have to be on point with the scriptures. You got to be on point with your understanding. How would you have confidence to go out there and stand in front of whoever comes in front of you? Right? You're in the chief place of concourse. Right? So anybody can come your way. And you want to have confidence in Yahweh Shai because of First of all, the spirit that's on you, right? That fervent spirit is gonna, it's gonna slash and cut up anybody in front of you, right? You're gonna have that what does this just say, that make your face hard against their face, right? Right. So you're gonna be already in a fervent spirit to go against anybody that comes up with anything other than, what we've learned from our teachers and our elders, right? We're gonna have that spirit to want to go against anything that comes against the words of Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. But also having the confidence to be able to go into the scriptures and prove it that way also, right? Knowing that you know the scriptures, you know the precepts, you know the doctrine of Yahweh Bashim Al Shai, so that, nobody can come against you and confound you. And it takes time, as babes in the truth. It's going to take time, As a babe in the truth, you can't think to learn everything quick. It's all about experience. It's all about endurance, in its truth. Being patient, enduring the hardships and the difficulties of going down that straight path, that difficult path to get the wisdom and knowledge, right? So eventually you are, seasoned enough to be able to do those things, but it takes time, A person coming to this truth and thinking that I'm just gonna, be at this level at this year, or I'm gonna be at this level in a couple months, you have to let the Lord, increase you in these things. It's not about you; it's about where the Lord wants you to be, right? The Lord gave every man a certain amount of talents. He might have gave you one, he might have gave you two, right? But as long as you do what you need to do with those talents that the Lord gave you, and that's all that matters, right? Let's go to Philippians, right? We all love Philippians 2:12. It's quoted a lot, amongst the brotherhood. 2:12. It says, "Wherefore, my beloved," this is Philippians 2:12. "Wherefore, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed, not in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your salvation with fear and trembling." Right? Work out your salvation with fear and trembling. You understand the things that are coming upon the earth. You want to have some type of treasure stored up in the heavens based off of the efforts that you put in serving Yahweh Bashim Al Shai, right? So work out your salvation, right? With fear and trembling. You don't do it because somebody's watching you. Well, we know the Lord's watching us, right? We know the Lord's watching us. So, and that's the main reason why we work and we do what we got to do. But we're not working for men. We're not, I know this, this person, right here is going to be looking for. No, you're not doing it for that. You know that you're doing it for your own salvation, right? You're working out your own salvation. Of course, the brotherhood, they're going to be on you to make sure you're doing what you got to do. But you're actually doing this because you feel like you need to do it. Nobody's pressuring you to work. They might be pushing you to a certain standard because you have that will and that spirit to want to work, So now, okay, this is the standard since you want to do this. But a brother's not pushing you to do anything. Like, if you don't want to do it, you just don't have to do it. You can kick rocks, It's about the spirit that's in you that wants you to do it. So now you want to do it. This is the level that you need to be on, right? Let's go to First Peter, or I believe it's 2 Peter 1:10, and we're going to end it. This is 2 Peter 1:10. Wherefore thy rather, brethren, give diligence to make your calling and election sure. For if you do these things, you shall never fall. Right. So we've been called in this truth, and being called in this truth, we want to be diligent. We want to put in that effort. Exert ourselves in this truth. Sometimes you study so much, you gotta take a break. But as long as you're doing those things you need to do, you'll see those fruits manifest. Like, for instance, if you're studying something and you can't remember certain things you're studying, like you can't remember certain words or certain history, but eventually when you do it enough, you're going to eventually start remembering the history. You're going to eventually start remembering those words that you couldn't remember before, because eventually those things that you're studying is going to be bound in your mind, or binded on in your mind. It's going to eventually be able to be pulled from. Your brain is eventually going to be able to pull from those things that you've learned. It might not be able to do it immediately, but eventually, when you study something, so much, it'll eventually be able to be drawn from your brain. So that's all it takes is this effort, and this truth. Put in the effort. If you labor, then you'll reap the benefits. So with that, I want to give all glory, honor, and praises to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Until next time, Lord willingly, Shalom.